This International Workers' Day has seen alternative mobilisations as much of the world's workers remain on lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. Retail workers at several major companies in the United States walked off the job this May Day as part of a coordinated one-day strike to demand proper means of protection during the coronavirus pandemic. Many South Africans got up early this Friday to take advantage of the fact that they can now step out of their homes and exercise, thanks to a slight easing of lockdown restrictions. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. May 1st, International Workers' Day, is traditionally observed with speeches, rallies and demonstrations across the world, despite not being observed as an official national holiday in the United States, where it originated. This year, the COVID-19 pandemic has meant that most workers are stuck in their homes rather than taken to the streets to demand their rights. However, trade union movements across the world have found alternatives to mark the day.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, trade unions, popular movements, political parties and other associations called for virtual May Day demonstrations around the world to preserve people's health. In Greece, a government-ordered lockdown couldn't extinguish the May Day protest spirit, where demonstrators lined up 2 meters apart in careful rows in Athens' Syntagma Square. Organizers wearing masks and gloves used tape measures to set out exact positions for the protesters. Meanwhile, in Russia, traditional May Day parades were cancelled and trade unions took to the internet to mark the struggle for workers' rights under the slogan "Solidarity is stronger than infection." In Cuba, citizens followed the call made by President Miguel Díaz-Canel to sing the national anthem and mark May Day from their homes, complying with the social isolation measures to stop the spread of COVID-19. From early hours, houses, public buildings and workplaces raised the flag to pay tribute to workers, in particular those in the healthcare sector, and those who are overseas providing healthcare to fight the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Bolivian Congress has passed a law to hold general elections within 90 days. The Plurinational Legislative Assembly of Bolivia enacted the law on Thursday night, following this postponement of the 2020 general elections due to the coronavirus pandemic. The president of the Bolivian Congress, Eva Copper, issued the bill after the rejection and observation submitted by de facto President Janine Áñez of the bill previously drafted by the Supreme Electoral Tribunal. Former President Evo Morales, exiled in Argentina after he was ousted in a coup in November 2019, congratulated the members of Parliament through his Twitter account for reaching the decision. Meanwhile, security forces are repressing the population in the Bolivian city of El Alto. Many residents have protested to demand food and social assistance payments, which were promised by the de facto government in the context of the coronavirus lockdown, as well as free and fair elections. Thousands of graves have been dug in the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo as the country struggles to cope with the coronavirus outbreak. More than 13,000 graves have been dug at the city's Vila Formosa cemetery as the country prepares for more COVID-19 deaths. Burials have already begun at the mass grave, with cemetery workers in full protective suits seen carrying coffins and conducting short burial services while loved ones grieve. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has downplayed the threat of the virus, which he has previously described as a little flu. Brazil, the worst-hit country in Latin America, has reported more victims and confirmed cases than China, currently standing at over 87,000 cases and over 6,000 deaths. The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases and fatalities continues to increase in the Caribbean. The Dominican Republic remains the worst-hit nation in the region, with almost 7,300 confirmed cases and more than 300 deaths. It is followed by Cuba with more than 1,500 positive cases and 64 fatalities. Meanwhile, Jamaica has reported a total of 422 cases and 8 deaths. They are followed by Martinique, Guadeloupe and Trinidad and Tobago as the countries with the highest number of cases reported in the region. And on the occasion of May Day, Grenada's Foreign Minister Peter David sent a message of solidarity to workers in Cuba and Venezuela while denouncing the unilateral and coercive measures imposed by the United States, which impact on their daily lives.
On a day like this, we should also remember working class people all over the world, and in particular for us, the workers in Cuba, China and Venezuela. Workers in Cuba and Venezuela have had to suffer more than they should because of brutal and illegal economic sanctions imposed by world powers. But it is those same workers of Cuba who are all over the world in the front line against this global pandemic. Those are the same countries on the backs of the workers that continue to come to the aid of the region when we need it most, as they have already demonstrated through this pandemic. Their struggles must be seen as our struggle, and we must offer solidarity forever. Before I end, I must take this opportunity to again thank all workers for their understanding and solidarity.
More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. At least 10 states across the US eased coronavirus restrictions on Friday, despite the number of cases having surpassed 1.1 million. Meanwhile, New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo announced that New York schools will remain closed for the rest of the academic year. The news is unsurprising considering the state is still seeing 1,000 new coronavirus hospitalizations a day, and another 289 New Yorkers died from COVID-19 yesterday. The death toll in the United States now exceeds 65,000, while almost 159,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. And also in the United States, retail workers at several major companies, including Amazon, Whole Foods, Target, FedEx and Walmart, called in sick or walked off the job during their lunch break this May Day as part of a coordinated one-day strike in protest of working conditions and inadequate protection during the coronavirus pandemic. According to press reports, the mostly non-unionised workers held pickets outside their warehouses and storefronts. More in the following report by our correspondent Jorge Gestoso.
Thank you. It's May Day all over the world, not necessarily in the US. The Labor Day is celebrated on September the 7th this year, even though many workers in very important corporations such as Amazon, FedEx, Walmart, Target were striking in demand of better protection on their works. They say that most definitely the companies are not providing them with enough protection equipment to avoid to being contagious by the coronavirus, and in some cases there were people who died because of that, and also a better compensation in terms of sick days and hours worked beyond the workspace. On the other hand, the pandemic continues non-stop, getting more and more victims. We're talking that the rate of deaths continue around 2,000 per day, and we have already, by the end of the week, increased dramatically. We're talking that on March 1st, there were 2 cases. On April 1st, 4,808. Today, the deaths were reaching 65,000, and the people with cases of coronavirus were talking about 1,100,000. Even though President Trump says that he is a successful story in this, in the managing of this pandemic, and everything is going to be under control very soon. We get back to you now.
The number of COVID-19 cases and fatalities continues to rise in Italy, but at a slower rate as the epidemic curve flattens. According to published statistics, Italy registered 269 new COVID-19 fatalities in the last 24 hours, taking the death toll to 28,236. The number of positive cases is now over 207,000. Meanwhile, more than 78,000 people have recovered from the virus. The data confirms the positive behaviour of all the indicators of the epidemic curve, even regarding the number of fatalities, representing the lowest daily figure in the past 5 days. Spanish health workers clapped and cheered as a field hospital set up in Madrid to deal with the coronavirus outbreak was dismantled. Spain is cautiously easing lockdown measures as the numbers of new cases registered each day has dropped to around 300. The country has reported almost 243,000 cases, while it has seen over 24,000 fatalities. Meanwhile, Spanish authorities referred to the economic impact of the pandemic.
Forecasts indicate a sharp contraction of GDP in 2020 of at least 9.2%, mainly due to the fall in domestic demand. In the first quarter of 2020, the unexpected shock of the COVID put an abrupt end to the positive growth cycle that had started in 2014. The scenario has completely changed, with negative implications for the activity.
China's Hubei province, where the coronavirus outbreak started, will lower its emergency response level from Saturday as part of the latest relaxation of the restrictions put in place to contain the spread of the virus. The deputy governor of Hubei province, Ying Yongyang, said at a press conference that starting from May 2nd, prevention and control measures will also be adjusted following the downgrading of the emergency response level. According to health authorities, no new confirmed COVID-19 cases were reported in Hubei on Friday. Once the hardest hit Chinese province, Hubei has reported no new confirmed COVID-19 cases for 27 consecutive days since April 4th. Meanwhile, the forbidden city of Beijing, one of the most popular tourist sites in the country, was reopened at 30% of its capacity. And despite President Donald Trump's claims he has evidence that the novel coronavirus was created in a lab in the Chinese city of Wuhan, the US Office of the Director of National Intelligence has concluded that the virus was not man-made or genetically modified. The information revealed the results of research carried out by the DNI on the origin of the COVID-19 virus. The statement issued on Thursday assured that there is broad scientific consensus on the natural origin of the coronavirus. Shortly after the report was published, Trump attended a press conference at the White House where he once again blamed China for the outbreak, claiming to have seen evidence it originated in a Wuhan lab. With more than 27,000 COVID-19 deaths so far, the United Kingdom is set to be one of the worst hit countries in Europe, and it appears all but inevitable that the government's response to the outbreak will be subject to an inquiry. Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his government have been criticised not only for not stepping up testing, but also for moving slowly to impose a lockdown and for a lack of protective equipment for health and essential workers, sparking protests. According to a former head of the civil service, the scale of the coronavirus outbreak and the response it has required from government means a large-scale public inquiry is now inevitable in order to learn the lessons of the UK's response in case of another pandemic. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the country will consider easing some of the coronavirus restrictions next Friday. Morrison met with the National Cabinet and decided, along with state and local leaders, to relax restrictions earlier than expected. In a statement, Morrison stressed that the Cabinet will meet twice next week in order to adopt the appropriate decisions. The official figures in the country show more than 6,700 cases and 93 deaths. And we're taking one final break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. The International Criminal Court has announced that the Israeli regime could be prosecuted for war crimes against Palestinians. ICC Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda reiterated on Thursday her position, affirming the statehood of Palestine, granting the court's jurisdiction to probe Israeli war crimes against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, the besieged Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem. The announcement was welcomed later in the day by the Palestine Liberation Organization, which stated that it trusted that the facts of this issue will prevail and that the long-awaited investigation into war crimes committed in the territory of the State of Palestine will soon be launched. The COVID-19 death toll in Iran increased by 63 in the past 24 hours to reach 6,091 fatalities. Health Ministry spokesman Kinesh Jahanpur, speaking on state television on Friday, explained that the figure represented a slight fall from the 71 deaths reported the previous day. Iran is cautiously easing its lockdown, allowing residents to return to shops, bazaars and parks over the past week. With a population of 80 million, Iran has suffered the largest death toll in the Middle East and reported more than 95,000 positive cases. Africa now has almost 40,000 confirmed cases of the novel coronavirus, representing exponential growth in the number of COVID-19 infections in recent weeks. To date, 38,825 people have been infected in the African continent, and more than 1,600 have died from COVID-19, making it the continent least affected by the pandemic so far. Lesotho remains the only African nation with no confirmed cases. Among the countries with the highest number of cases is South Africa with 5,951, followed by Egypt with 5,895 and Morocco with over 4,500 confirmed cases. Many South Africans got up early this Friday to take advantage of the fact that they can now step out of their homes and exercise, thanks to a slight easing of lockdown restrictions. May Day is a public holiday in South Africa, and this year saw the first day of the new Level 4 lockdown, which sees some economic activities resume in the country, with more than 1 million South Africans expected to return to work. Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister Nkosana Dlamini-Zuma announced on Wednesday that South Africans could run, cycle and walk from May 1st, but only within a 5-kilometre radius from their homes between 6 and 9 a.m. and not in groups. In Sea Point, Cape Town, residents used the opportunity to stretch their legs despite the misty conditions. Ethiopia recorded 2 new coronavirus cases on Thursday after more than 900 tests were run, taking the total to 133. The 2 new cases were both Ethiopians, one of whom had travelled from Kenya and the other from Somalia. Health authorities also reported 7 more recoveries, bringing the total to 66. All remaining patients are isolated at the Eka Kotebi General Hospital in the capital Addis Ababa, and none are in intensive care. Meanwhile, Ethiopia has reported 3 fatalities. The country has recorded single-digit increases in the number of cases over the past 7 days, as compared to double digits by some of its neighbours in the East and Horn of Africa region.
Including school closures, bans on public gatherings and work.
Kenya has reported 396 confirmed coronavirus cases and 17 fatalities.
Let us not drop our guard, keep our vigilance, and strictly adhere to the measures that have been put in place. That is the only weapon that we have to prevent us against this pandemic. And I'm certain if we continue in this path that we shall be able to beat this enemy.
Legendary Nigerian drummer Tony Allen, who created the genre known as Afrobeat, along with his old bandmate Fela Kuti, died suddenly at the age of 79 in Paris this Thursday. Allen was the drummer and musical director of Fela Kuti's band Africa 70 in the 1960s and 1970s. During that time, the pair created Afrobeat, combining West African musical styles such as highlife and Fuji music with American imports like jazz and funk. Afrobeat went on to become one of the symbolic genres of the 20th century African music. Allen taught himself to play drums from the age of 18, drawing inspiration from American jazz greats Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker, as well as contemporary African music. In the midst of the social isolation necessary due to the COVID-19 virus, today Cubans remember musician Juan Formel 6 years after his death. Formel founded the Grammy Award-winning Cuban group Los Bamban in 1969, internationally known as the Rolling Stones of Salsa. A bass player, composer and arranger, Formel is undoubtedly one of the emblematic names of popular dance music in Cuba, changing the understanding of the genre through Los Bamban. A series of changes to the format of the traditional salsa band, such as the addition of trombones, the use of electronic musical instruments, and lyrics that chronicled the island's daily life, marked Los Bamban's distinctive sound and led to Formel's recognition as one of Cuba's most successful musical composers. And we finish this news brief precisely with a video in tribute to this great Cuban musician. Remember, you can get all the latest news on our website and social media. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.
El primero que llegaba a trabajar era Juan, el primero, ¿verdad? En cualquier lugar. Estábamos en un baile y el primero que subía al escenario era él. Y le hacía bajo, boom, boom, boom.
Este amor que se muere, porque tú no comprendes lo que es quererte tanto, lo que es llorar sin llanto, vivir de una esperanza.
Es un trovador por excelencia y además tiene la virtud del trovador, que es ser un cronista de su época, y creo que no hay nadie como Formel como para ser el mejor trovador de Cuba en estos últimos 40 y pico años.
Me tocó nacer en una época hermosísima de grandes músicos. No me tocó compartir la escena y la música con los Beatles, pero me tocó, a mucha honra, compartir la música con Juan Formel y los Gambas.
A través de mis canciones he logrado penetrar en tu forma de pensar y me siento satisfecho porque sé que hasta la fecha nadie me ha querido mal. Cantemos todos, cantemos al amor y que vuele el pensamiento hasta allí donde nos duele. Cantemos todos, cantemos a una voz, bienvenida la tristeza, que es la dicha de saber que un día hubo amor. Gracias.